Hello everyone, I'm GWFan the Softcore Brony, and this is a guide dedicated to the specific jobs / shops of the Fairy Village in Breath of Fire 3. To note, this is a companion video to my How to Fairy Village Guide and Best Practices video. So if you're looking for how to specifically build a fairy village, there was a link to it in the video description. In any case, this video is going to go over 9 of the 10 basic jobs. I'm excluding Scholar because this is an essential job for building the village in general and is not needed once you are finished with it. If you want to know more about the Scholar job, you can find a specific section going over it in the aforementioned companion video. Otherwise, this video will go over the Merchant, Inn, Gift, Fortune Teller, Explorer, Antiques, Music, Casino, and Copy Shops. First things first though, if you want to get more than just Scholar, Merchant, and Inn, you are going to need a higher culture stat than 0, up to a maximum of 7. More on that in the aforementioned companion video as well. It's kind of important, not just for acquiring more jobs, but also for the first job I'm going to be talking about in general. So if you know anything about it, you might want to go review that. It's all conveniently listed under the Sky Blue / Scholar section of that video. So if you want to go check that out real quick and come back, be my guest. In any case, the first of these jobs I'm going to talk about, of course, will be the Merchant Shop, which is also the first shop you unlock through Scholar. And before we go anywhere, that means I, once again, have to continue talking about the Scholar job. Obviously, you don't need to have advanced culture at all to access the Merchant job, but culture has a secondary function in the village, and it specifically has to do with the merchant shops. When you first open any kind of merchant shop, it will be stocked with exactly one thing for sale. If you have a culture of 0, you can stock up to 3 more items and no more. If you do want more, you'll need to raise culture. 1 more item for every level of culture to ultimately grant you a total of 11 items for sale in a given shop. Again, more on Scholar and how to raise culture in my guide to the Fairy Village video, a link to which is in the video description below. But with that out of the way, let's finally talk more about the blue stat, or dark blue stat. Referred to as the business stat, despite it supposedly playing a role in 3 different jobs, in truth, the only one it seems to have any effect on is the merchant job. For consistency, I'll be referring to the amount of stat by numbers, the same as I did in the general village video. To recap, a full stat is 5, a near full stat is 4, roughly half is 3, roughly a quarter is 2, roughly a fifth is 1, and nothing is 0. How does the merchant work then, you may ask? First, when selecting merchant, you will see a selection of 3 different types of shops: weapon, items, and handyman. Despite the names, weapon can stock both weapons and armor, item can be stocked with items and accessories, and handyman is a little odd because we get items, weapons, and accessories you can equip. What kinds, though? Well, if you select one, you will then be given a secondary choice of either ability or speed. Which you choose will affect how quickly the type of shop can be stocked. Technically. The difference is really small. Basically, you can assign up to 3 fairies in a shop. Unlike with the Scholar, fairies assigned here will only affect the specific shop they are assigned to. The higher their combined blue stat, the faster they can stock the shops based on number of battles you have been in. Once again, when you first build a shop, you'll have 1 item for sale there based on what type of shop it is. If it's a speed shop, then for the fastest rate, we need a combined blue stat of 13 or higher to gain more items at a rate of 1 item for every 5 battles. Yep, in this case, there is no difference between 13 and 15. No matter the shop or type, you must do a minimum of 5 battles to advance the shop. For every 1 less point than 13, it will require 1 additional battle. 12 points will require 6 battles, 11 points will require 7 battles, so on and so forth. And what of the ability shop? Well, a total stat of 15 or 3 max blue stat fairies to gain 1 item for every 5 battles. For every 1 point less than 15, it will require 1 more battle. 14 points will be 6 battles, 13 points will be 7 battles, so on and so forth. So, yeah, speed is only slightly faster than ability, depending on what blue stat fairies you have available to you. However, don't let that make you think you should just do the speed version and be done with it. Speed may be slightly faster, but in general at least, ability will net you better items. This effectively gives you 6 different shops that merchant can become, and the stock will always be the same depending on which of the 6 shops you choose. A speed weapon shop will always stock the same things no matter how many you make or how many times you play the game, for example. What can you get? Allow me to show you. For the record, if you have more you need to buy from a shop, but don't have the money for it just yet, you don't even have to leave a fairy tending it. You can just leave the shop empty, and whatever stock you had before you removed all the fairies will remain once you've, well, returned a fairy to said shop. As for the shops themselves, well, speed weapon shop over here. I've got all of them in advance, thankfully. We got all this, well, technically decent stuff. A lot of it will have already had access to up to this point here. Notable here, for me at least, is the Spiked Gauntlets, which is one of the strongest shields you can buy at the present time, or even for the near future, because the next time you can buy a better shield, you'll be able to get the that is, the ultimate shield shortly thereafter. And then, of course, we have the Ice Halberd, which is a slightly stronger weapon for Gar, and also Ice Elemental if you really want it. I mean, if you really want to use Gar, that is. I personally don't really tend to, so I mostly do this for the Spiked Gauntlets, and to a lesser extent, the Royal Dagger, which is the strongest weapon you can buy at the present time, that at the earliest possible time you can build the Fairy Village. Next, we have the Ability Weapon Shop, which, well, starts off looking a little bit the same, but then changes quite a bit, starting with the Amber Breastplate, which is a very strong piece of body armor we can get at this particular point in the game. I don't care so much about the weapons, although the Cat's Bulgur is notable simply because you need to catch a Barandi if you want to do this in the Manillo shop otherwise. Protectors is kind of notable because even though it's not a heavily defensive shield, it gives you +2 to status resistance, which can be nice in certain situations. And most notably for me is the Tiger's Cap, which is, well, practically the strongest helmet you can purchase. This is the ultimate helmet for Peiko and is the strongest purchasable helmet for Nina and Momo, so it's definitely something you'll want to get there. And another nice thing I like about the weapon shop's armors is that all of them are universal for the most part, except for the correct cape. But yeah, most of them are all universal, so anyone can equip them. And then, of course, we have the Ouroboros, which is Nina's ultimate weapon, raises intelligence by 10, and also casts the Raise Dead spell infinitely if you use it as an item, so that's a thing if you so choose. Next, we have the Speed Item Shop. Has well, not really notable items, honestly, because you can buy most of these anywhere except for the multivitamin. You'll have limited access to this throughout the game. Otherwise, we have some decent accessories, most notable to me being the Balance Ring, which protects against confusion, which is, well, a fairly common status effect in the second half of the game there. Most of the rest of this you can buy anywhere except for the Dream Ring, which also is notable, but I don't particularly care about the speed item shop, just because you have almost all the same things in the ability item shop, but better, and also the napalm for some reason, because, well, technically better. In a certain sense, you can get the balance ring a little sooner, just if you have, 3 fairies that are max stat. Next blue stat, that is, so there's that. You also have the barrier ring, which, yeah, gives you +3 to psionics. I do not care about that at all. Diamond ring, +3 resistance to death. Doesn't come up as often as you think it would, so I'm not particularly big on that either. I'm mostly interested in the balance ring as far as the item shops go, and for some folks, even that, they're not gonna care, so make the item shops if you want to. Lastly, we have the handyman shops, beginning with the speed shop. This one has quite the variety of things in it, including, once again, the napalm, and also, I suppose, notably the bell collar and the holy mantle, which otherwise are kind of expensive as far as Manillo shops go. And notably, the angling rod is here. I personally don't care about this rod, because even though it has the furthest reach of any rod outside of the master rod that nobody ever bothers to get, it has an extremely weak reel, so yeah, you're never going to catch anything that's way the heck out there outside of, like, early game fish. We have the Belladonna, which we can buy elsewhere regardless. Royal Dagger again, for whatever reason, and then Soul Gems are here if you really want them. And I don't especially care about that one because I care more so about the ability handyman shop, which, yeah, I don't know why it has the Molotov as its second to last item. It's just there. Once again, we have the angling rod. Notably for me, here's the Tiger Claws, which is the strongest weapon you can buy for Peiko at, well, the particular earliest time you can make the Fairy Village. We also have Soul Gems again, and somewhat notably the Hidden Dagger, which is slightly weaker than the Royal Dagger, but this is the strongest weapon with a weight of 1 that Ryu can equip, and also Nina can equip it for some reason. I don't know why, but there it is. So yeah, the only thing I especially care about is the Tiger Claws. Maybe go for the Hidden Dagger if you really want it. Bell Collar and Holy Mantle might have some uses, but most of the rest of this isn't especially notable stuff there. But those are the merchant shop items. And with that big ol' explanation out of the way, let's talk about a far more simple job. The inn. This is one of the jobs that is exactly what it is from the moment you open it. It's an inn. Crazy. Granted, this particular inn is significantly cheaper than most other inns in the game outside the ones in the Dawna Mines, as this will only cost 10 zenny to stay at. And like any other inn, you can save here, which, even if you don't count the fact that you can save in camp, is still quite useful to be able to have this in the Fairy Village, since there is at least one job where saving inside the village is a great benefit to you, but more on that later. Now, besides just being an inn, if you assign more than one fairy here, you can also get some minorly interesting information about what you specifically have been doing in the game. A second fairy will tell you how many hours you've been playing the game, which is pointless, and because, I mean, you can just open the dang menu if you really want to know that. Whose idea was it to include that in the Fairy Village? Anyway, minor ranting, soft ranting, whatever aside, the other thing the second fairy will tell you is how many random encounters you've been in up to this point, and how much zenny you've earned in total since the game began. If you have a third fairy, she will tell you drawers you've looked in, which I don't think includes drawers that had nothing in them, but don't quote me on that. It also definitely does not include looking in a drawer more than once. Admittedly, I have not determined how many drawers exist in the game total. Anyway, this third fairy will also tell you how many treasures you've opened, and will also tell you how many times you've been fishing. Make it in if you really need it, but for the most part, probably won't unless you make the explorer job. More on that a little later in the video. Next, we have the gift shop. No stats required for this one, so assign whatever fairies you want here. Finally a use for Dr. K and soap! But in all seriousness, this is one you actually can exploit in such a way that you might want to create multiple gift shops at once. Why, you might ask? What does the gift shop do, and how does it work? Well, after you created the shop, assign fairies there, and, well, also gotten in at least one battle, because nothing's going to happen without at least that, the fairies will, quite literally, give you a free gift. And, most importantly, this is a predetermined gift, based on how many battles you've been in since you last were in the village, or set up the shop, or more so, since the last time the fairies gave you a gift. The counter will only stop when you talk to each individual fairy at the shop again. If you come back and don't talk to them, you can battle some more and potentially receive a different gift. How many gifts? One per fairy. You could even just talk to one, reset the fairy's counter, and talk to the rest later after you've been in more battles if you want to potentially receive a different gift from them. So what kind of gifts can you get from the shop? You can get all kinds of things depending on how many battles you get into. Appearing on screen, this, to my knowledge, is an accurate chart of how many battles you need to get in and what gifts you will receive from however many fairies in however many shops you make. Yes, 7 battles exactly will net you a fish head from the fairies. That's the permanent stat boost for intelligence, making it the single easiest stat to farm for, since you can just assign 15 fairies or more to run multiple gift shops, run around for 7 battles, come back, and get a whole bunch of fish heads at once. Just another reason why it doesn't matter if a master hurts intelligence, because you can always easily boost your intelligence to the gift shop if you want. Truthfully, that's kind of the main thing I personally use it for. Yes, other stuff is also technically pretty good, like the coupons accessory after 77 battles is not so far-fetched to get, but frankly, you can just get the coupons for free not too long after the first time you can start working on the Fairy Village anyway, literally immediately after you've re-recruited Momo, so it's not like it's that much earlier. Otherwise, magic shards might be worthwhile, swallow eyes are workable, but not terribly fast. And then of course there is the Spirit Ring, an accessory that grants a 50% reduction to the cost of any spell or skill. Notably with the exception of not just the cost of, but also the upkeep cost of dragon transformations. But at 500 battles, yeah, I don't think so. That's kind of insane. There are better ways to get one of those, including in a way I'll be talking about very soon in this very video. But not next, because next we have the Fortune Shop. Technically, this is a just for fun sort of job, although oddly enough the fairies can tell you legitimately useful stuff, like info about hidden stats, or the fact that healing magic hurts undead, and things of that nature. For this one, simply make the shop, assign 1 to 3 fairies there, and that's it! Simply talk to the fairies, and each shop will give you a different fortune. To get a new one, just leave the village and come back. Nothing else required, not even random encounters. I should mention that supposedly the light blue stat plays some role in this, but whether it increases the likelihood that the fairy will tell you something useful or not, well, really, what's the criteria for usefulness here? If there even is one. Having a fairy with a higher or lower light blue stat doesn't seem to really change what they might say, at least as far as I can tell. Do with this one what you will. There are a variety of technically useful to outright silly things the fairies can tell you, so have fun with it. That's mainly what this is for as far as I'm concerned. Let's see, it's been 6 months since I recorded the last part of the video? Wow, let's see if I've still got this, shall we? Moving on to the Explorer job. For the record, this is the better way to get spirit rings I was talking about earlier. Explorer is also the most dangerous job because it's the only legitimate way fairies can die, at least outside of the village running out of food if you neglect hunting. For basics, the Explorer uses the red stat in its calculation, though in this case for the purposes of success rather than the number of battles. The stat affects two things regarding the job. One is how likely the fairy is to survive the expedition outright. In other words, if they die or not. Second is, if they survive, then whether or not they were successful, or in other words, did they find an item or not. I would like to note that the red stat can be important in this case, but interestingly, even a fairy with a 0 red stat has some amount of chance of both surviving and being successful at exploring, so if you're trying to use this to kill off a fairy that has worthless stats or doesn't have a stat that's useful anymore because you've already built all the rooms in the village, for instance, hey, you might luck out and they'll bring you back something anyway. And yes, killing off useless or no longer necessary fairies is something that this job is used for. Personally, I usually don't because there are only so many things I like to abuse the fairy village for, but if you took a bad fairy like Scat and want to kill her off so a different fairy can be born, go for it. That's all you. But regardless, how exactly does Explorer work, and what can you get out of it? This all begins with what kind of exploring you want your fairy or fairies to do. From the get-go, when you choose to create an Explorer job, you are presented with 3 choices: day trip, nearby, and distance. Choosing one determines a bunch of things: how long the trip will take, odds of surviving the trip, what you can find, and odds of successfully finding anything. Furthermore, the red stat is taken into consideration for the success of survival and success of finding anything. Let's start with how long the different trips will take. I've seen a couple of different numbers thrown around for how long this may take, oddly enough. It seems like most guides can't seem to agree on it for some reason, so through my own testing, I determined that completing a day trip requires you to get in 6 battles, regardless of whatever the red stat of the fairies involved. Completing a nearby trip will require a total of 12 battles. Completing a distant trip will require 18 battles. As a note of best practices, in order to ensure that fairies both don't die and are successful at finding something, I believe it is best to stagger fairies that are exploring. Having only one fairy set up to explore, go out and get into one battle, come back to the village where the exploring fairy will then be gone, then add another fairy you may want to explore to the same shop. Leave, get into another battle, come back, then add a third fairy to said shop. Any more exploring, go out and get into one battle, create another shop, add a fairy to it, so on and so forth. At least in my opinion, this is the best way to go about it if you plan to abuse the Explorer. And just for the record, if you change the job or move the fairy after sending said fairy out to explore, they will simply come back perfectly fine and do whatever else you may have wanted, so no repercussions if you change your mind about exploring or you accidentally sent a particularly valuable fairy out. Next, let's talk about the odds of dying. Looking at a thread on GameFAQs where someone apparently reverse engineered several aspects of the village, we are presented with the following table. In this table, we are given not only the odds of surviving based on the type of trip, but also odds depending on the red stat of the fairy involved. So, for example, if you have a near max red stat, or in other words, a number of 4, and decide to put them on a nearby trip, that fairy's odds of dying is 31%. The higher the red stat, the higher the chance of survival. As you can also see from the chart, odds of survival for a shorter trip is significantly higher than for a longer trip. As with most things regarding the fairy village, whether a fairy survives or not is determined only after you've entered the village, so save outside of it, and then enter to see if the fairy has survived. If they haven't survived, soft reset by holding down start and select for a few seconds, and load your save. Or if you're using an emulator, save time by making a save state outside the village. Once you've seen that a fairy has survived, immediately create an inn if you don't have one already. And, for once, save inside the village! More on why in a little bit. Now don't let this make you think you should stick to shorter trips. You can find decent stuff from shorter trips, but further trips not only potentially gets you even better stuff, but oddly enough, if I've read the source on GameFAQs correctly, it would seem that further trips also increase the odds of finding anything at all. Table for success supposedly looks like this, according to said reverse engineered thread I just mentioned, but it doesn't add up to another table in the same thread regarding what you can find, which only shows odds for distant travel as far as I can tell. So, what can you find? Well, there are different tiers of rewards you can potentially find, including what some like to call a zeroth tier for finding nothing. Outside of the zeroth tier, which other tiers can you get prizes from depends on the distance of the trip. As far as I've seen through both sources and testing, it would seem that only Tier 1 is accessible if the ferry goes on a day trip. If you send the ferry on a nearby trip, then both Tier 1 and Tier 2 prizes pools become available. And if you send the ferry on a distant trip, Tier 1, 2, and 3 prizes become available. So what are these prizes you can get? First off, remember, earlier I said that if the ferry survives, you should then use an inn inside the village to save. That's because, unlike most other things in the village, the prize you get from the surviving fairy is not determined until you talk to said fairy. In my experience, it does seem that it's already determined if they failed or not, though. Because if they fail the first time, then no matter how many times I reset, they always seem to fail. But if they do succeed and you don't get an item you wanted, just soft reset by holding start and select for a few seconds and try talking to the fairy again. Or save state just before if you are using an emulator. So again, what are the potential prizes? To my knowledge, this list on screen now is accurate. Within each tier, there are 16 items with an equal chance of being selected from in each tier. Yes, as you can see, there are some items repeated, not just in the same tier, but across more than one tier. Just means there is a slightly higher chance you will get those items depending on what tiers you have accessed. Now, there are some decent items in Tier 1, notably the life and magic shards, as well as arguably the flame shield, which you otherwise can only get as an ultra rare drop from the Lizardman enemy around the Rapala region. But in general, I don't find day trips to be all that worthwhile unless you are just looking for a quick opportunity to kill off bad fairies. Even Tier 2, I'm not terribly wild about outside of probably the Swallow Eye. Magma armor is relatively not difficult to get as a drop from the Vulcan and Mount Zublo, and you'll be able to find an ice shield in a chest later. Tier 3 are where the really valuable prizes are, and as such, distance is the only type of trip I personally like to use. Dragon tiers can be sold for an obscene amount of money in literally the next shop I'll be talking about in a moment. Force Armor and Mind Shield are in-game armors even stronger than the equipment you can buy from the merchants in the Fairy Village. This is the only way you can get the Ghostbuster, which is Momo's only holy elemental weapon. But for the most part, the biggest prizes here, of course, are the Spirit Ring and the Ivory Charm. I mentioned the Spirit Ring earlier. This is the single easiest way to get it. In fact, the Fairy Village as a whole is the only way I know of to get it. And then there's the Ivory Charm, of which, as far as I'm aware, exploring is the only way you can acquire it. Ivory Charm raises all resistances by 2, elements, psionics, status, and death included. And this also includes holy resistance, which means that healing magic will have a greater effect on you. It also restores 1 HP for every step the equipped character takes, and heals 1 HP at the end of every turn in battle. And this all stacks too, so 2 Ivory Charms make you practically invincible to everything that is not a non-elemental attack. So yes, exploring! Not really high risk because save scumming, and for very good rewards, also because of save scumming. I'm not going to make much use of it in my LP proper for the sake of not making the game even easier than it already is, but if you want to abuse it, go nuts. It's all you, baby. So, back to a simpler shop. We have the Antique Shop. Simply make it, and it's ready to go as is. Technically, if you assign a fairy here, it will claim that the light blue stat does something, but so far as I've seen or heard, it does nothing, so move whatever fairy you want here. On the surface, it appears to be a shop where you simply have the option to sell and little else, but what it's really here for, or really I should say the only thing it's here for, is so you can get a better price when selling certain items. Which items? Antiques! Specifically the ones that say, appears valuable in the description. However, not all of them. There are some appears valuable or really trash loot items that will sell for exactly the same as any other shop. In the end, as a second fairy assigned to this shop will tell you, there are exactly 12 items that will sell for a significantly better price than at any other shop. She won't tell you which ones, annoyingly, but that's what this video is here for. Appearing on screen now, these are the 12 items that sell for a higher price, as well as the new price they sell for. Note, some of these, most notably that Dragon tier I mentioned a little earlier, are rare items you might get through exploring in few other ways. I mean, yeah, you could get a Dragon tier as a drop from the Zombie Dragon back in the Dawn of Mines boss fight, but that's only a 1 in 128 drop, not counting the charm skill, so good luck with that. More than likely, you'll be creating this shop temporarily whenever you have some extra items to sell, most likely after a successful exploring. Otherwise, you can always get rid of it and bring it back whenever necessary. Easy peasy. Also, yes, you can assign 2 more fairies here, but they just give you a small bit of extra info as I'm showing you here, and that's it. Not worthwhile to do. Let's move on. Next, we have the Music Shop. Like the Fortune Teller, this one also doesn't have any real tangible benefits to you. It's just purely for fun to listen to most, but apparently not all of the game's music. Opening a music shop will grant you only 1 song to listen to. Unlike most other shops, however, the set criteria for learning new songs isn't tied to a specific stat, so you can have any fairies you like do this. Furthermore, you oddly enough, unlock 5 more songs just from leaving the village and re-entering at any time, regardless of the number of fairies you have working here. Afterwards, or even during probably, if you have 1 fairy working there, it will take 5 battles to learn another song. 2 fairies will take 4 battles, and 3 fairies will take 3 battles. Altogether, there are 40 songs to learn, with the last 2 songs you can learn being For the Dragon's main theme and Castle in the Sky, the latter of which you cannot learn until you've beaten the game. Also, apparently the second fairy in the shop can eventually play the song called Pure Again, which plays during the ending credits, or at least an alternate version of it as I understand it. Since this is not a particularly essential shop for anything, I haven't explored it much and have little else to say on the matter. So let's instead move on to the next and frankly far more important shop, the casino. Or at least I'd like to say it's important because technically it can be manipulated, but unfortunately, as far as I've found through testing, only in a very specific way that is specific to playing the game on an emulator. More on that in a moment. Once you've set up a casino and assigned at least 1 fairy there, it's technically ready to go. Though there are some stipulations depending on how many fairies are assigned there, interestingly. More on that also in a moment. So for starters, there are exactly 2 games you can play at the casino. One is High and Low, and the other is Numbers Guessing. Beginning with High and Low, this one is a fairly simple, if not rather slow, high-risk, high-reward way of winning more money. The reason it's slow is because the maximum amount you can begin betting with is 100 zenny. For each round of playing, you will always wager all the money in the pot. As you win more money, you can wager the new higher amount if you so choose, or just quit and take your winnings as is. As for the game itself, basic idea here is the fairy will have 9 cards numbered 1 through 9 with no number repeating. They will show you the first card and then ask you to guess whether the next number or numbers will be higher or lower than the previous card. Now interestingly, sometimes, and frankly randomly, the fairy will show you 1 or 2 randomly chosen of the other 2 cards briefly before you start as well. I even had an instance where she showed me the first 2 cards after the first, making the first few guesses easy. Now, in regards to guesses, you have the freedom to choose how many cards in a row you will guess. You can choose to only guess the first card, or first 2 cards, or the first 3, all the way to guessing all 8 face-down cards. Note that you have to do this all in one go. If you guess correctly, even if it's just 1 card, your winnings will increase and you can go on to the next round, where you will wager your entire pot again to make between 1 and 8 guesses. Again, the numbers will not repeat, technically making somewhat informed guesses you can deduce. However, if you make even 1 incorrect guess, even if all other cards are right, you lose, and thus lose the entire pot of money as well. So, as you might expect, the more correct guesses you make in one go, the more money you can win. Through my own testing, I determined that the amount for winning looks like this. If you only guess 1 card correctly, current pot is multiplied by 1.2 times, or plus 20%. If you guess the first 2 cards, it's multiplied by 1.8 times, or plus 80%, and so on and so forth. As you can see, the pot gets significantly higher the more cards you can guess, all the way up to 144 times, which is pretty nuts. If you can guess that much, odds are you won't. Which is why I said slow earlier, because odds of guessing past the first few is not easy, and since you have no choice but to start with a maximum of 100 zenny, low guesses means a slow growth unless you want to bet it all on larger guesses. But hang on! That's only 1 fairy in the casino! What happens if you put more in? Well, if you have 2 or 3 fairies assigned to the casino, and talk to the second fairy, or really both the first and second fairy will suddenly be the same if you talk to the second fairy first. But if you talk to the second fairy, you technically can get higher winnings out of the high and low game. I say technically because it's only if you want to make higher guesses. I found a source before that said you win 4 times as much money, but besides not entirely being true, that's only mostly for guessing all 8 cards. Appearing on screen now, you can see the difference between 1 or 2 fairies confirmed through my own testing. You may notice the winnings are actually less for 3 guesses or less. It's only at guessing 4 cards or more that the numbers start to jump, and quite significantly at that, with almost 4 times as much money for the biggest pot. A little short, but I see where the person who made that claim got the number from. But in general, since the lowest are actually less, I don't find this to be a particularly good way to get money. At least normally. Now technically, there is a way to cheat at this, but only if you are using an emulator. If you save state during the part where you are picking higher or lower, the numbers will still be the same when you load the state again. So you can make as many mistakes as you want, load save state, and cheese a stupid amount of money. I don't like doing that, but it is an option, so if you want to, there it is. Just thought I would mention it. Then we have the other game you can play at the casino, the numbers guessing game. Every time we talk to the fairy at the casino, they will remind you that you need to wager 500 zenny if you want to play the numbers guessing game. Every freaking time. Even if you don't play anything. It kind of sucks. But in this case, how do you play the numbers guessing game? In essence, you have 8 chances to guess a randomly generated 3-digit number. The more guesses you make, the lesser of a prize you can win. This time, not money, but actual items, weapons, armor, and accessories. Now you might be thinking to yourself, that's ridiculous! How are you supposed to guess with 1,000 different possibilities for the number? Well, for starters, it's actually not quite that hard. The number of possible combinations is in fact 504. The reason is twofold. 1, the digits can only be 1 through 9, so the number 0 is not an option. 2, the numbers can only appear once in the combination. That means no repeating numbers, so 222 or 212 are not possibilities because the number 2 can't appear more than once in a sequence. Still doesn't make it that easy, mind you, but I have had an instance where my first guess, of course, was 123, because that's the first possible combination it could be, and it happened to be right. So, yes, I have legitimately guessed this in one try before. Probably won't ever happen again, but it happened. Now, thankfully, you are not guessing blind here. When you make a guess, some terms will pop up on screen. Hit, blow, and miss. Every hit means that many numbers is not only correct, but in the correct position as well. They don't tell you which one or ones, unfortunately, but at least it tells you how many. Blow means that you got one or more numbers right. It's just not in the right sequence. And miss, of course, means one or more numbers is flat out wrong. Now, what can you win? Popping up on screen, here are the list of prizes. To my knowledge, each prize under the number of guesses has an equal chance of being chosen, though don't quote me on that one. I should also note that this is the list to the best of my knowledge. I haven't had time to test and make sure every last thing is on there. Now, some of you might look at that list and say,
What the heck, man? I don't see any weapons and armor on that list like you said earlier. What gives? Interestingly, that's with only one fairy at the casino. It used to be believed that another list would trigger only after you beat the game, but that is not true. The second possible list activates if you have 2 or 3 fairies in the casino and you talk to the second fairy. The second list is now appearing on screen. As you can see, there's their weapons and armor. And not just any either. In one guess, you could win the Goo King sword, which is Ryu's ultimate weapon. Otherwise, only one is an ultra rare drop from a rare encounter towards the end of the final dungeon. Also, Divine Helm and Ultimate Helmet for 3 characters, including Ryu, and also otherwise an ultra rare drop from 2 different enemies, one of which is in the final dungeon. And some other fun stuff as well, but those are the 2 big ones besides the Spirit Ring, which is far more easily obtained through the Explorer job. And yes, you can cheat on this one too, but again, as far as I've been able to tell through testing, only if you are using an emulator. Save state before you make your first guess, determine what the number is, load save state, and enter that number. You got it in technically one guess, you dirty cheater you. And no, despite at least one source I came across that claimed you can cheat by saving in the fairy village via the inn, no, you can't. The number appears to be determined upon talking to the fairy. Same goes for the high and low game. So, as far as my own personal testing has determined, emulator cheating only. But hang on! What's the third fairy in the casino do then? Oddly, and I have no idea why they put it in the casino, but if you put a third fairy here and talk to her, she will give you the option of changing the names of either your party members or the fairies in the village. Yeah, that's a thing. I've never used it, especially for the fairies, because that would just be confusing, but it's there if you've ever wanted to give your characters or fairies a different name that is only a maximum of 4 letters long. So now we get to the final job in the fairy village, the arguably most useful one according to most players, the copy shop. This one utilizes the light blue stat, or intelligence stat as it's called, and you do want to try and have a max light blue fairies to make this easier, even though you can totally save scum with this one too. And despite saying that, I would like to add that even a fairy with no intelligence stat can successfully copy something. Having a perfect stat can greatly or only slightly increase the odds based on what you are trying to copy. First things first, after making a copy shop, which of course also takes maximum 7 culture, you simply talk to one of the 3 fairies you can assign there to start working on copying one item of your choosing. Each fairy will work separately and independently of each other. If you give an item to one fairy to copy, the other 2 won't do anything. So you can attempt to copy up to 3 different items per copy shop. Keep in mind the warning they give you every time. If you change the shop or the specific fairy working on copying after giving them the item, then the item is automatically lost. Fortunately, this does not include the few crucial items that are necessary to complete the game, such as the Fairy Tiara, which allows you to get into the village at all. For such items, the fairies outright tell you they can't copy it. This includes all fishing rods, including the purchasable ones, as well as the Dragon Blade, for whatever reason, even though you don't actually need it to complete anything in the game. So, besides a fairy's intelligence stat, what criteria determines the odds of successfully copying an item given? Interestingly, it's determined by the price of said item. I don't mean the selling price either, but the purchasing price, even if it's an item you can't actually purchase anywhere, like the Ring of Fire. Looking at the reverse engineered thread on GameFAQs I mentioned before, we can see that odds for copying items looks like this, with the range of odds for 0 intelligence versus 5 intelligence shown. Obviously, with the higher odds being the higher numbers. As you can see, there are apparently 8 tiers of odds, and the first is anything with a purchasing price lower than 100. This is basic healing items like healing herbs and other stuff you can easily purchase in most any item shop. It only takes 10 battles to attempt a copy, with odds of success at 60% for a no intelligence fairy versus 75% chance for a max intelligence fairy. Using the Ring of Fire as a further example, even though we can't buy it anywhere, if we try to sell it, we can see that it sells for 2,500 zenny, which means that its official purchasing price is 5,000 zenny. Looking on the list, we can see that its price is more than 3,000 zenny, but less than 10,000 zenny, meaning that it falls into tier 6, and thus 20 battles to attempt to copy, with a success rate of 25% for a no intelligence fairy versus 31% for a max intelligence fairy. For the record of other items of interest, all of the permanent stat boosting items like Swallow Eye fall into tier 2, which are relatively easy to copy, whereas big items you may really want more of, like the Spirit Ring or most in-game equipment, otherwise falls into tier 8 and is the hardest to copy. Fortunately, you can just save scum, outside of the village mind you, and keep trying for a success until you've copied whatever it is you want more of. As with exploring, I would highly suggest staggering your attempts if you're trying to copy a similar tier or even the same items. Ask one fairy to copy, go out and get into a battle, come back and ask the next fairy to copy, go out and get in another battle, come back and ask another fairy to copy, and so on and so forth. If you don't want to go the save scumming route, you saint you, fortunately, if you fail to copy an item, usually you will just get it back. But not always. Determined entirely by the given fairy's intelligence stat, as seen in this chart here, there is a chance that if a fairy fails to copy, they will have screwed up so bad that the item will have been turned into a rice ball instead, which is a worthless item that does nothing. That's why I personally suggest the save scumming route, because you don't want to lose your rare or otherwise hard to acquire items. And that is every job/shop in the Fairy Village. It's been a long time coming, but I'm finally finished with the most difficult of my technical videos. Hopefully this helps some of you out there. I know learning a lot of this certainly helped me. So, until next time, viewers.